question that has been bugging us since the first game is why did 6 eat the gnome? Or in other words, the runaway kid transformed into the gnome. The simple answer could be that she's a horrible person to just move on with this question. But the more you think about it, this simple answer wouldn't make much sense. Why would she hug the gnomes and show affection and then randomly eat one rather than a sausage which was offered to her? It would have been much simpler to just go for the sausage than the gnome. In today's video, I'll analyze some information provided to us to theorize why 6 chose to eat the gnome rather than the sausage. Hi folks, I'm Ari, your narrator, and here is why 6 ate the gnome. Before we get into the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and beware, as there will be spoilers ahead. The main theme of Little Nightmares 1 is hunger. Originally, the creators named the game Hunger, but apparently the word hunger showed up more results for the Hunger Games. Therefore, the creators chose the name Little Nightmares to have an original name associated with them. Little Nightmares seemed to become even more relevant as the game portrayed what an over-exaggerated deadly habit can look like and what a nightmare it truly would become. Overeating is prevalent in Western countries with an average of 30 to 40% of the populace suffering from obesity. 6, our protagonist in Little Nightmares 1 suffers from frequent debilitating hunger bouts since the beginning of the game, which only get relieved after she consumes something. At first, you can look at them as typical hunger bouts, which you can experience during extreme starvation, but soon, it's revealed that the hunger bouts 6 suffered from are anything but starvation. 6 satiates her first hunger bout by eating a loaf of bread offered to her by an imprisoned child. A kind gesture showed by an empathetic kid, which is completely unlike 6, which we will learn about later in the game. 6 then falls right into a trap, eating a piece of meat placed inside a cage after experiencing another hunger bout. The hunger then progresses even more when 6 is left with no choice but to eat a live rat, which was trapped in a mousetrap. What makes it worse is that the next room contained a variety of food and vegetables. This gets only worse when 6 experiences another hunger bout, at which point she eats a live gnome who was offering her a sausage. This turns out to be even worse than originally thought, as the gnomes turn out to be children, transformed into gnomes to work to keep the mall running. 6 then suffers from another hunger bout soon after, eating the lady herself. This gives her some sort of dark smoke ability, which she can now use to absorb life forces. Why does she consume the gnome, however? As it doesn't seem justified. Let's say her hunger bouts are that severe that leave her with no option than to consume something, so she won't perish. She still would be able to eat the sausage than the gnome. Keep this question in mind as we'll get back to it later. Every time 6 consumes in Little Nightmares 1, a shadow figure appears in corners and edges of the screen. You'd be able to observe it only if you pay close attention. The shadow figure illustrates 6's dark side, the side that forces her to eat uncontrollably, a dark side that derives from the most sinister depth of humanity. Starvation. Often in movies or even real events, you learn to what extent people go to satiate their hunger. It's a phenomenon with the combination of two elements, survival and excruciating pain. But with 6, this dark figure is a little more sinister and evil. It seems as if it gets stronger and inflicts more hunger pain upon 6 the more she eats. The more is consumed, the more is required in shorter time intervals. First, 6 satiates her hunger by eating a loaf of bread. Then it quickly changes into eating a steak, which ends up putting her in a trap of the janitor, which proves that she loses any sense of understanding when she suffers from a hunger bout, as it was very obvious that it is a trap. Another sign that the Shadow 6 is taking over. Then soon after, she eats a live rat trapped in a mousetrap. It doesn't take long before the shadow figure causes another hunger bout on 6, and this time it only gets satisfied by eating a gnome, a larger, living being. As evident that 6 could easily consume the sausage offered to her by the gnome than the gnome itself. It only becomes more sinister when you learn the gnomes were in fact once children themselves, but they turned into gnomes for hard labor by the lady. 6 then suffers from another hunger bout and finally eats pieces of the lady. The lady's dark smoke powers get absorbed by 6, who then can utilize it at will to drain lives instantly, no matter the life being sizes. It seems as if 6 was predestined to kill the lady and absorb her dark powers. Maybe it was the Shadow 6 directing and guiding 6 to the lady all along, and the lady knew this day would come someday, as if it was prophesized. You can watch a full video explaining this idea by hitting the card above. It's understandable, even if not acceptable, why 6 ate majority of things and beings throughout the game, and why she absorbed the life forces of the guests at the end. But what doesn't make much sense is why 6 ate the gnome rather than the sausage. You might say that she requires live things to satiate her hunger, but that wouldn't explain why her hunger was satiated in the beginning of the game by a loaf of bread and a piece of meat. Shadow 6 seems to get stronger and hungrier the more 6 eats. At first, it doesn't take much to relieve her pain, but soon after, the shadow figure gets so strong that it almost takes over 6. It forces her to consume live beings. At the end of Little Nightmares 2, we can see 6 as a face-to-face with the shadow figure. The Shadow 6 points to the maw for 6 to visit, and this further fortifies the idea that 6 was predestined to eat the lady and obtain her powers. The shadow figure forces 6 to eat the gnome as it had enough power over 6 to do it. The Shadow 6 could only get stronger by consuming lives, a destiny for 6 in the future where 6 survives by absorbing life forces. And that only becomes easier when 6 obtains the powers of the lady, which will eventually cause her to become the lady herself, who will be dependent on the maw and the guests to survive. As I theorized before, the lady requires the life forces of the guests to survive. Therefore, eating the gnome was the beginning of Shadow 6 taking over, a sign that 6 now requires live beings to satiate her hunger and keep her shadow satisfied. It introduced the craving for life as hunger bouts, but nothing seemed to satisfy the need until 6 started eating or absorbing lives. It showed that regardless of gnomes being such friendly and harmless creatures, even with 6 hugging them, it didn't matter to 6, and 6 truly became the villain she defeated at the end. And that about does it for this video, folks. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more, stay tuned right here by hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell. You can also follow me on Twitter for more interactions. It's been your host R. Till the next video, have a fantastic day.